Hi, and welcome to the Frog Pond School of Design, where we like to have a good time talking about things related to architecture. And today we're going to be very much related to architecture because we're going to talk about a building. The building I have in mind is one of the most recognizable structures in the entire world. It is the Sidney Opera House. You've seen it with the sails, look like shells, but the intent was to reflect the sailing ships coming into the harbor there at Sidney. This was they came up with this idea back in 1957. They decided to build this and to choose the design and the designer by competition, by design competition. These were popular back then. They still do them somewhat. And when they do, they're usually very detailed and very stringent about the submission requirements. So they received 233 entries from 32 different countries around the world. So you can imagine the jury, which also was made up of, there were some notable architects on the jury itself. And they got all these designs to sort through and come up with. And Eero Saarinen, he of the St. Louis Arch, pulled some papers out, and this submission, supposedly, as the story goes, did not meet all the submission requirements. It was very sketchy, not very thoroughly developed, but he picked it up and he said, "Gentlemen, here is your opera house." So the winner of the competition became Jorn Utzon, a Danish architect who was well known. He had received a lot of acclaim in his career, but nobody really expected him to come through and win this contest. So they had their designer, they had an idea of a design, and wanted to move ahead. So their first mistake was they got in a hurry, and they started building before the entire design was worked out. And this was really complex because there was nothing like this ever built before, and they weren't really sure it could be done. They brought in an engineering firm to push it through, and they actually had foundations and columns up before they had the shells designed. And then they found out, oh, they're not big enough. They had to tear them down and start over. So the whole thing just was a snowball of complexity and delays and over budgeting that went on and on for a long time. Those shells were very complex. I saw a documentary on the building back, not long after it was finished, or actually before it was finished. Talking about how they were using surveyors' equipment to identify points in space where they were supposed to set these shells. And a lot of, they did use some computers, but the computer power back in the 1960s was a little bit limited. So they just kept chugging and chugging along. The project ended up, was originally estimated at $7 million. It ended up at $102 million, which in today's dollars is almost $1 billion. It was supposed to take 4 years to build. It took 14 years to build. So it really, really became a fiasco. There was a change in the government, and the new government that came in was never in favor of the project in the first place, and they were really not in favor of Jorn Utzon. He became persona non grata, left the project, and never really did see it. He was brought in as a consultant years and years later to help out with some of the interior renovations. But the Queen Elizabeth showed up in 1973. They finally completed this project, and she showed up for the opening. Jorn Utzon was not there. He was not invited. He was not mentioned. So this is the fate of the architect if things don't go well. But he supposedly finally solve the problem of how to shape and build those shells. And he did so, as the story goes, while peeling an orange one day. He thought, this makes some sense. And if we make all the shells out of segments of a sphere, it'll all fit and go together. And that's what they did, and it finally worked, and they got the thing built. It's, again, one of the most noted projects ever for overruns, both time and dollars, but the final result was magnificent. It's a symbol of Sidney and a symbol of Australia, and it's really hard to look at it and say, yeah, that wasn't successful, or they should never have done that. They probably just should have made sure they had the designs all squared away before they started digging holes. Hey, thanks for joining us today on the Frog Pond School of Design. We look forward to seeing you hanging around the pond again real soon.